Hey, deserving listeners, Shayne, Love is Blind interview. Let's watch.
Her, like, it wasn't even the case at all. Like she genuinely loved me and she know who I was, I guess. And it's like, I'm sick of people doing this. Like her saying no at the altar, people were like cheering her on. And like, it's like, that's great and all, but like, you know, she wanted to say yes to.
Yeah, that's awful that people would cheer. And I've seen that. And I've seen that with other couples on other shows and this show. That there's this, I don't know, it's like we're watching an MCU movie, like a Iron Man movie, and there's the villain, and occasionally there are characters like that, but even then, I would say that's, I think, uncool. These are real human beings, and have you never been in a messy situation, relationship-wise? Have you never made a mistake? Have you never been a jerk face to your partner? Or past partners, particularly when you're younger and you're stressed out and, you know, all these other things are happening. Have you never done that before? Is that, if you ever did, how would it feel if there were millions of people cheering your partner on as they reject you? Yeah, you get him. He's a, and again, some characters, some cast members, I would say, well, I don't know, maybe, but Shayne, really? Like,
Comments on people's shit, like little passive aggressive stuff. It's like she knew all the hate I was getting from the show. Like I was getting ripped apart. Like I said, like I said before, I was trending for the first 5 days under the Ukrainian crisis on Twitter. On Reddit, I was getting like all these fucking animations and
yeah, that's got to be awful. If I were Shayne's friend, I'd be like, when the show comes out, radio silence. Just turn off your phone. Go on a meditation retreat for a couple weeks. There's nothing good that can come from what's happening right now. And yeah, I wonder if that also contributes. It sounds like it does to his hurt feelings that makes him want to point out to Natalie that she has problems too, and he wants everyone else to know that Natalie had problems too. Yeah, I would understand that if everyone thinks like Shayne is, this 100%, that he's 100% to blame for everything, and he's some evil monster, then, what I would hope Shayne would do is say, look, I have problems, but can you tone it down a little bit? Instead of what seems to be happening is he's trying to turn the internet on Natalie by bringing data to the table that will give the mob a reason to bully her.
She didn't once like stick up for me and say, like, I had like when she posted one day on Instagram about like, just a reminder that like what you saw on TV is just a short snippet of our love story. Like I'm like, can you please do something like this? Like I have family back home. Like, dude, something, just stick up for me.
Interesting. Yeah, that's fair for him to ask her to do that. And I think it would be, I don't know. I think it would be kind of a jerk face move not to say something. I mean, why wouldn't you if you're Natalie? Now, maybe there's a reason, but yeah, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you say, hey, everyone, just so you know, he's not completely to blame. I had some issues. He's a good person. We just didn't work out, but I'm guessing she might have said something like that. Yeah. I wonder if Natalie was worried about being the target herself, and she's like, well, as long as the target is on me. Yeah, again, we don't know. If Natalie were here, she might rebut and say, no, I did, and we're not given that chance to hear from her.
I'm not a bad person, and like I was sick of like her not like defending it, and like she was milking every single thing she can.
Hearing you talk and the things, like, you're getting a lot off your chest.
I am. I'm trying to be respectful with it too, as much as
you're trying to be respectful. This is your version of respectful. So yeah, I mean, I get it. He, is it human to, after being dumped and especially being bullied? He I don't know if I show this, but he said that he was trending under Ukraine. There was a Ukraine war, and he was trending just below that for 5 days as the show was coming out. And just to give you, not just Love is Blind, but Shayne Love is Blind was trending. And yeah, that's just gotta be awful. But so I get that he's not only hurt by Natalie, he's hurt by the bullying online, which is real. People become suicidal because of that bullying. It's hard to protect yourself against. So I get it. He's upset, but yeah, if this is his, because the way he's painting Natalie is she's fake, she doesn't care, she's mean, she's hypercritical. It's mostly her fault that a lot of weird things happen. She lies, he has a lot of accusations coming out. So if this is his version of respectful, I'd hate to see what disrespectful is.
Shit together.
Yeah.
Are you saying safe in the sense that, like, I feel like Natalie could get herself out of a jam.
Mm-hmm.
Like she seems like, yeah, she has her shit together.
Yeah.
Is safe that way, you mean?
No, like, just like, I don't like, on like, for instance, like a different relationship I would be in, I would feel like uneasy about certain things, like about our future and all that kind of stuff.
I don't know how much of the clips I've shown thus far, but Nick asked Shayne, how come you keep going back to her? Also, she's been kind of thrown under the bus this episode, so give us some good qualities about her. And Shayne says that he feels safe with her and that they had great fun behind the scenes. They were best friends. They got along well. He could imagine having a family with her, spend the rest of his life with her. And when compared to other women that he's dated, it just felt safe. It felt good. It felt secure. It felt like a long-term relationship. It felt like something he wanted, which of course makes sense. That's what usually happens in the beginning of a relationship. And Nick is having a hard time comprehending that. He's like, well, I don't understand. How can you possibly feel safe if you felt belittled? And then Nick asks, are you saying she feels safe because her life is together and she's, her career and everything, she's stable? Is that what you're talking about? And Shayne's like, no, it's safe. It's emotional safety. And for Nick, he's like, I don't understand that. How do you possibly feel emotionally safe with someone that belittles you? And this is the problem of, what is it, do I want to say, the public when they watch these kinds of things. And I frequently, it's interesting because Nick is representing something that I often will pick up in people's comments and questions about these shows, like on other reality TV shows when there are problems in a relationship. Like if you watch 90 Day Fiance with Gino and Jasmine or Mike and Jimena, these kinds of relationships, they're, the stuff that they show us it's a lot of the conflict. And if you're watching it, you're thinking, how do you possibly stay in a relationship like that? It's stupid. Jasmine would be accused of that. How do you possibly stay with Gino when he did those things? And the thing that I know, because I've been down these roads with people so much in depth, is that they very likely behind the scenes have a lot of love and connection. Going back to actually Jovi and Yara, if you know them, at the very beginning of their story on the reality TV show 90 Day Fiance, they were fighting a lot. And it was, in terms of what the internet might call toxic, it was high conflict and high hostility, a lot of rejection, a lot of really destructive behavior. And I didn't see, in terms of what was being edited, any evidence that they had any affection for each other. And so in that moment, I actually thought, is there no affection? But now that they're together and they have kids, or they have a kid, and they seem to be doing really well, I actually watched them on Diaries and they're doing great. We must have not been seeing behind the scenes the warmth and the connection that they were having in addition to those conflicts and prior to the season. So I'm bringing up that example because with the other couples, at the very least, when I see them together, I see little bits of evidence that there is warmth and there is affection, love for someone, and evidence of good times that you've had with that person. And when I see that, I think, oh, okay, that's a little glimpse into what likely is a much more frequent interaction between, at the very least, just not fighting with each other. And so that's one thing that I think the public will have a hard time seeing, because, well, and I don't blame people because the shows don't depict it. So, but you have to imagine that it would be there. Like with Mike and Jimena, if you're familiar, people would be like, I don't understand why Mike would feel like he had this is before he started to become abusive, why Mike would feel he has the right to do X, Y, and Z. Or to Jimena, they'd be like, I don't understand why you would possibly be with that person. And there was little bits of evidence, I don't know, that behind the scenes there was affection, there was friendship, there was respect and love, or at the very least, like. And so when I see people reacting that way, I'm like, well, we don't see the whole picture. The other thing that I think that the public does is that it's hard for people to comprehend that there could be something bad. Like when the public, and maybe Nick, hears Shayne's story that Natalie was being belittling to him. That's all we see. Like when we have an association with the relationship, all we see, like 100% of what we see or 99% of what we see is belittling. But to the people in the relationship, the belittling is 2% of the relationship. It's not a good 2%. It's a pretty bad. It's significant. It's not great. But what the people in the relationship, there's so much more. And for us as therapists, we have to consider that what we're being told is giving us a skewed percentage along those lines. If you're a friend of someone, this is another thing to think about, is don't just accept what you are being told from your friend about their partner as a representation of the entire relationship, because it can screw up your point of view, not only of that other person. If your friend vents to you about their partner, the next time you see that person, all you're going to see is that negativity. It's going to be hard to interact with them. You've been triangulated in that way. But it can also mean that you would give very bad advice to your friend, like leave the relationship. I don't understand, or even ridicule. Like, how would you possibly stay in a relationship that's 100% belittling when it's not 100% belittling for them? The other thing to think about that I often will say, if you're venting to your friend, know that if you don't sprinkle in some positivity in there, they're going to have a very negative, overblown idea of your partner, which could really backfire for you in a number of ways. Anyway, so yeah, we have to be able to accept that people can be in love and have genuine love and have genuine friendship and genuine good times with occasional issues like belittling.
Possibly with her, I just knew it'd always work out. I felt like that's the kind of safety I felt like. I just knew it'd work out and we'd be good. We'd figure everything out and we would take care of it that way. But then, yes, it's fucked up to think that way because of how else the other things she would do. I don't know why I would think that way.
I mean, listen.
That's how I felt. It was easy, and like, dude, someone told me this the other day. I was like, "Where are we like connected? Like the trauma whole situation? Like, where are we like
trauma bonding?"
Yes.
Oh, what?
It's not trauma bonding. So trauma bonding is Stockholm syndrome in the clinical literature. Now, when people misuse the term trauma bonding, it doesn't get me going as much as, say, gaslighting or PTSD or OCD, these kinds of things. There's not a lot of people who have experienced trauma bonding who even refer to it that way. They will refer to it as Stockholm. It's when you're in an abuse situation and your traumatizer, you bond with them. So you're trauma bonding with your abuser. That's what trauma bonding is. And I understand why the lay public would think that it means bonding about one's trauma. Like, I have trauma, you have trauma, we are now bonding. And it also is an accusation of patriarchy and anti-emotion, because when people use the term trauma bonding, they're usually saying it's a bad thing. Another thing that people will accuse people of is trauma dumping. My friend and co-host Rebecca says that another word for trauma dumping is being a good friend. Because when you have trauma and you talk about your trauma it's all about consent. So if you non-consensually talk about your trauma that is very difficult to hear with someone, then yeah, I guess you could call that trauma dumping. But these often online. In fact, anecdotally, when I would look at how people are using it, they're just using it when someone is just talking about their trauma and it's unknown if consent was given or not. Anyway, so now the spirit behind what they're talking about is that the speculation, people are trying to figure out why Shayne and Natalie keep trying to get back together. Again, because I think people don't understand that behind the scenes, they have a lovely relationship. They have issues, but behind the scenes, there were mostly lovely or neutral times. And so because they can't comprehend that, they're like, I don't understand. There must be some pathology to this that's driving people together. And people do this all the time in friend groups and stuff, like, why are you even with that? But there must be some pathology to you or this relationship. And there could be, but what they're hypothesizing right now is that because they both went through the trauma of being on a reality TV show, the difficulty, you're both in the foxhole together, that would bond you, and the bond would be false. The bond would not be there if you weren't both in this foxhole of the show. And I've hypothesized that actually that effect could help people to overcome barriers that are often present for people in the beginning of a relationship, so that they can actually enact a relationship that was, quote unquote, meant to be. And I sometimes wonder about Love is Blind or Married at First Sight. These kinds of shows might help people to push past those barriers for functional effect, meaning it's a good thing. We could also see it being a bad thing.
It has to be it. And that's what I keep going back to. Is we were trauma bonding, I think.
Yeah.
What we went through was so messed
You
up.
will always...
Shayne is saying it has to be it. It doesn't sound like it resonates with him, but he's confused himself as to why he keeps going back to her. And we do this in relationships. I've talked about this before. I won't belabor it. But when we're going through a difficult breakup, we will rewrite history. We will forget the good times. We will wonder, there must have been something wrong with me that I was with that person, when often in reality it was real love. It was a decision that you made in a healthy way. And now that you're in a complete negative state about the relationship, it's hard to remember that.
Was Deep D correct when she said Shake got a great edit? It was far worse than what you saw.
Yeah, for the most part.
Anything you can add?
It's stuff like where the edits were like, you could just tell like the guy was there, like he was there just to go to the end of the show. That's all he cared about.
Interesting. He was there from the beginning to end the show. Wow, I mean, that's the troll of all trolls. That's interesting. You'd think they would have excised him early if that was detected, or they just thought it was TV gold. It's just interesting to think that Shake was edited well, that there were worse things, because these shows usually like to highlight that kind of stuff because that's what gets people going. I mean, imagine if they had shown all of the stuff, how, I don't know, how trending Shake and the show would have been, because he was trending anyway, but imagine if they showed all of it. Maybe they didn't show all of it because it illuminated the possibility that he was faking even all that stuff. It's interesting to think about that, right from the start when he was first going on the pod dates, he'd talk about weight and all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting to think about him from the mindset of, I am trying to come across as an antagonist. I'm trying to break the rules of this show. I'm trying to tank the show. That's possible, right? I mean, that's Shayne's opinion and maybe other people's opinion, but I wonder. Shake's an interesting one, and I've hypothesized about it before. There's various different possibilities. That's one. And then it's like, well, what would compel you to do that? Like, why would you waste your time? So what's wrong with you that you would want to do that and ruin it for everyone else? But another hypothesis area, which is, of course, I don't really have any data for, is that he initially went on the show, or part of him went on the show to actually meet his wife, to fall in love and to get married. And there were moments of insecurity for him that he would revert to a persona, a part of himself that is protective of him, that likes to act superior, like he's above it all. And the way that he sometimes does that is to troll people. I mean, why does anyone troll anyone, really? There's various reasons, but one of the reasons is because people feel inferior and they're insecure and they're anxious and they don't know what else to do. And so they make a joke because it shows that you're not vulnerable. It shows that you don't care. It shows that you're above it all. It shows that, there's another person you're making fun of. So that's the target. And I remember hypothesizing that, and I guess I still kind of would put that at the top of the list, but who knows? Because I have a hard time believing someone would waste all their time, because there's a lot of time you have to do prior to the show, right? Plus, if you really wanted to tank the show, you would, I don't know, break the contract in some significant way, and maybe he's already done that. But I think if he broke it in a significant way, like he revealed that the show is some massive, manipulation, that we would have heard about that. Plus, is the show a massive manipulation? There are manipulative aspects to it. I'm quite positive, but a lot of it is legit, as evidenced by the fact that Shayne and Natalie, their whole story was legit, right? Behind the scenes, in addition to the on-scene stuff.
Me and we were having a conversation yesterday, and on the one day, she calls me a disgusting human being. All this kind of stuff yesterday.
Why did she call you?
Wow. So, according to Shayne, Natalie called him a disgusting human being. On one hand, out of context, that's verbal abuse. Well, in any context, it's abusive or hurtful, purposely hurtful. But I'm guessing that there's a context there. Might Shayne have said something impulsive? I mean, he's shown that he's capable of saying, I hate you, or the worst thing that ever happened to me, that kind of stuff. So had he said something that provoked at least a reasonable response like that? Let's see if we can I'm guessing we're not going to get context.
Like if Natalie was here, what would she say?
It's about this, again, it goes, she still can't get over the fact that, like, the whole Shayna stuff.
What's Shayna stuff, though?
Like,
the pod?
Everything outside the pods, like, when the first 5 episodes dropped.
So Nick asked a good question. He said, what would Natalie say if she were here, as to why she would say that, which is an excellent question. And then Shayne says, it's because of all the Shayna stuff. All the Shayna stuff. Like, that was a pretty brief moment that it was a stuff, right? Prior to the beach scene, because once the beach scene happened, that was pretty definitive proof that Shayne was, loyal to Natalie and didn't want to be with Shayna. Or did Shayne and Shayna have a thing afterwards?
She was getting hate really bad too. Okay. So we were communicating. We were talking.
Gotcha.
Shayna was also getting a lot of hate, which some of the criticism, I'm sure, was justified. I'm guessing most of it was not, in terms of the intensity and the kinds of things that people... The thing that I'm always boggled of, or I was actually telling my wife this the other day, that I wish that we had a culture that frowned upon people who would DM cast members on the show. It's one thing to yell at the screen. It's one thing to post something on Reddit. It's another thing to personally go after them without taking a beat and saying, maybe I have a distorted idea of what actually happened. Maybe it's not my place. Maybe I don't know enough information. Maybe I should tone it down a little bit. People just attack people in their DMs. I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like, 1, grow up. 2, you think you have enough information to say these kinds of things. 3, these are just regular people, usually. And they're just doing, he's a real estate agent. Shayna is I don't know what but they're just trying to go through their day. And you don't think they already regret saying things? You don't think they already are being criticized? You feel like you have to pile on? And then people get death threats because of stuff like this. Yeah. And I feel like, okay, that's going to happen, but I feel like our society almost encourages it or something. It's some sort of right that people feel like they have. And maybe in 20 years, there will be frowning on this of like, hey, you can yell at the screen, but don't DM the person. Leave them alone.
I want to make this very clear. Me and her have hung out once, in a group setting, never alone, never hooked up, nothing like that whatsoever. Shayna.
Okay, just want to make sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're saying you hung out in the group setting while filming or post?
So it sounds like, at least according to Shayne, Natalie is jealous of Shayne and Shayna's friendship. There wasn't much evidence of that on the show in terms of that would alert us to Natalie having that kind of susceptibility or behavior. But, it wouldn't be surprising. But I don't know. I'd love to hear what Natalie would say to that.
Show.
Post show, post show, because
Gotcha, okay.
once we kind of like bonded on the fact that we were both getting murdered on this show for the part. So we reached out.
Also,
to
by the way, you were like,
because they're the only two that can understand what we were going through during that time. I couldn't. My friends didn't understand. Like, oh, just blow it off, blow it off. I'm like, fuck you guys. How do you want me to blow this off?
Yeah, the only way to deal with it, in my opinion, is to not read it. As a person who's been on the internet for 14 years, it's hard. And I have, obviously 0.001% of the attention that Shayne and Shayna would get. There are times and parts of the internet that I just don't go to because it'll get inside and it's hard to deal with. And I know some people have maybe a slightly easier time to deal with. I always think about this, like Conan O'Brien, I listen to his podcast and he talks about how he doesn't read any reviews or any comments ever. He doesn't read anything. And you think, well, he's Conan O'Brien, he's a gigantic star. Well, there are people at his level that read comments. And I don't know, but I think for Conan O'Brien, he learned at some point, it's just like, it'd be great to read the nice comments or to hear people's thoughts, but the cons outweigh the pros. So to tell someone like Shayne, with all the hate, to just let it go, there's a myth out there that somehow that's easy to do. Just like, haters are going to hate. It gets under your skin. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.